If I had imagined for even a moment what would happen that rainy afternoon, I would have closed that door firmly, sealing the world outside. Instead, I just left it open, unaware of how much that small gesture would change everything. From that moment, the course of my life took a turn I never imagined. My name is Elena. I am 45 years old, and for a long time I was certain that I had full control of my existence. Every decision, every limit, every desire was clear and well defined. I always knew who I was and what I wanted until that day. That rainy day that brought with it something different, something that escaped logic and overwhelmed me like a sudden storm. Luca, my 24-year-old nephew, burst into my room without knocking, like he did when he was a child. His manner was familiar, almost tender, but this time something had changed. I understood it immediately, even before he opened his mouth. The air around us seemed to vibrate, charged with an electrical tension that froze me in place. I looked at him carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. He was soaked, his dark hair stuck to his forehead, and his white t-shirt, now transparent from the rain, clung to his body, revealing lines and muscles I had never noticed. He was no longer the little boy I remembered. In front of me stood a man, a stranger with a deep and determined gaze that seemed to burrow into me. A shiver, subtle and unexpected, ran down my spine like a blade of ice. I held my breath, unsure of how to react. "I have to show you something," he said, his voice lower and firmer than usual, almost a whisper full of meaning. It wasn't a question. He wasn't expecting an answer. It was as if he had made a decision long before he entered that room. I stared at him, feeling a mixture of curiosity and fear as the scent of the rain mixed with his, creating a familiar but different aroma, riper, more pungent. It was something that stunned my senses, making me lose my mental balance. An alarm went off inside me. A rational part, the one that knew the boundaries and the rules, shouted to act, to get up, to regain control of a situation that was slipping away. But another part, deeper, more instinctive and dangerous, kept me nailed to the bed. It was as if I was waiting for something, an inevitable event, that I couldn't stop now. "What do you want to show me, Luca?" I asked finally, my voice shaking but barely audible, like a whisper dragged by the rain. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest, I was afraid he might hear it. Luca advanced towards me, slowly, with an eerie calm. Every step felt like a deliberate act, carrying a weight I didn't understand. He was so close now that I could see every detail, the raindrops sliding down my neck, stopping where my skin met the wet fabric. Every movement seemed full of intention. His eyes, which were once playful and lively, were now deep, dark, and peered at me with a determination I had never seen before. There was no longer a trace of carefreeness in him. It was a man, a stranger, and that look nailed me. "You already know," he murmured, his smile thin, barely there, but full of something I couldn't decipher. His words hit me like a punch. Did I really know? What did he mean? My mind, desperate, rejected that idea, but my body reacted differently. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, while my breathing became irregular. Outside, the rain was beating hard on the windows. The rhythmic noise seemed to accompany every beat of my heart. The silence in the room, however, was deafening, heavy, like a blanket that suffocated me. Then it happened. Luca slowly raised his hand and touched my face. A simple, almost innocent gesture, but that light touch shattered every certainty. It was like crossing an invisible boundary, one that I knew should never have been crossed. "What would you have done in Elena's place?" Write it in the comments. "Why are you here, Luca?" I managed to say in a small voice, even though I already knew that the answer wouldn't reassure me. "You know, Elena. You always knew it." Those words were sweet as a whisper, but heavy as stones. I felt them slide inside me, settling in a hidden corner of my heart. I looked at him, not knowing what to say. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to walk away, but I couldn't move a single muscle. It was as if I was trapped in that tension, suspended between fear and the desire to know where all this would lead. Luca leaned towards me, his warm breath touching my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. I felt every millimeter of the distance closing, a silent and powerful reminder of something I had always denied. I wanted to resist, to say something, to stop everything, but the words died on my lips. "I don't know if we have to," I whispered, but the sentence was lost in a breath. The truth was, in that moment, whatever happened next would change everything forever. And deep down, I already knew it. I was lost in him, in everything he represented. Every gesture, every look, every word seemed to dig a chasm inside me, a chasm into which I was slowly falling without any resistance. What did he want from me? I didn't know, but it didn't really matter, because now I couldn't pretend anymore. Something was growing between us, something that would change everything. When his hand touched my face again, it was a light, delicate touch. But this time it was different. There was a weight, a depth that went beyond simple contact. It was as if he was marking me with a gesture that spoke 1,000 words, a silent promise, a secret that only the two of us could understand. "You know," he whispered in a low, scratchy voice, looking me straight in the eyes, "you can't pretend anymore." Those words crept into me like an echo, shaking me to my foundations. It was in that moment that I understood. I was crossing a thin line, an invisible barrier that I had promised myself I would never cross. Yet there it was, dissolved like fog in the sun. Luca's touch was like a bolt from the blue, a sudden discharge that set my skin on fire and awakened every fiber of my body. His hand, firm and warm, anchored me to that moment. I tried to resist, to pull back, but it was useless. Every attempt at resistance crumbled like dust in the wind. His pressure, so light but inexorable, seemed to know every fragile point of me, every way to break down my defenses. Every inch of my body reacted as if it had always been waiting for that moment. I burned, and with me burned the boundary between what was right and what was wrong. There was something in his eyes that disarmed me, a pure desire, but also a calm confidence that confused me. There was no rush in his movements, just absolute certainty. He approached slowly, like a predator knowing its prey. The air around us became dense, heavy, difficult to breathe. I wanted to ask him to stop. I wanted to say that he couldn't continue, that I couldn't continue. But the words died on my tongue. I couldn't move. I didn't want to move. And I let myself be consumed. That touch wasn't just physical. It was something more. It was a deep, ancestral call which shook parts of me that I didn't even know. It was like I was made of wax, and he was the fire. I abandoned myself. I let myself melt. And as the world dissolved around us, in that moment it was just the two of us. There was no longer a before or an after. There was only me and Luca, and the pleasure that erased all doubts. His touches became more intense, more urgent, as if he too could no longer stop. My body followed the rhythm of his, a dance that knew no interruptions. The tension was unbearable, palpable, alive. Every inch of me wanted more. Every breath, was a new step into the unknown. When I couldn't hold on any longer, I gave up completely, and it was like falling, but without fear. It made me feel alive, intense, more real than I had ever felt before. I no longer thought. I no longer reflected. Every thought went out like a candle in the wind, and only that pure, overwhelming sensation remained. When it was all over, I lay next to him, my heart beating so hard it hurt. Every breath was labored, yet there was an unreal peace in that moment. The body still burned, but the mind was a battlefield. Confused, foggy, unable to find answers. How could I let this happen? I wondered, staring at the ceiling. The room seemed emptier than it had ever been. Why didn't I stop everything? I slowly stood up, hugging my legs to my chest. Luca was no longer there, but his presence was still felt everywhere. It was in the sheets, in the air, in my skin, like an indelible mark. Something had changed, and I knew I would never be the same again. I had crossed a line, and I couldn't go back. But the truth was I didn't want to go back. Curiosity consumed me. I would have paid the price. I would have faced every regret so as not to forget that moment. That forbidden moment was now engraved in my memory. After that kiss, after that night, the world was no longer the same. Everything had changed. I would never look at Luca the same way again, because he had shown me a part of myself that I didn't know, a part that perhaps I had always known existed, but had never had the courage to explore. Maybe I would have regretted it, maybe not, but that curiosity, that desire, that fire that burned inside me would never go away again. I only knew one thing: I would never go back. If you would like to see other videos from this series, write "I'm waiting for the next one" in the comments. If you found the video interesting, put a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next releases. Thank you so much.